This Darshan is our maiden voyage to the entire world, and we are certain that students will be with us in increasing numbers all over the world, and it's a very exciting thought. Most of you have played the string game with your fingers, and if you can realize all these different strings that are all held together by the Antakarana of God, it's quite awesome indeed. So I would like to first take from my notebook Hindu definition of Darshan. I think we should be very specific in what we know about Darshan, what the word means. So take notes if you like. Darshan is a Sanskrit term meaning literally view or sight. The Encyclopedia of Eastern Philosophy and Religion defines it as paying respect to a holy man or sacred site in order to receive blessings and purifications from that presence. Every encounter with a guru or holy person can be regarded as darshan. That encounter has to do with what we've always termed the figure-8 flow, and the movement of that flow through that infinity sign, whether vertically or horizontally. So when we encounter El Morya and Kuan Yin and Mother Mary, that encounter has left us with something of the saint. Some special part of that saint we have internalized. And when we go within to our heart chakra, that fire burns ever more brightly. We balance our threefold flame. You have an encounter every day, every morning when you wake up. You have an encounter with your I Am Presence, an encounter with your Holy Christ Self. If you take those few moments when you are awakening, and some of you religiously keep a notebook at hand so that you can write down dreams or experiences or retreat experiences. So we who know that there is a fire that burns brightly in our hearts, we who know that we have an I Am Presence, and that our Holy Christ Self shadows us, we have the understanding that if we will it, we can be in perpetual darshan. Think about that. We can have one track well grounded in what our job is, and the other track is that inner sense, I am with my Guru Padmasambhava. Author Diana Eck, who studied the importance of seeing in the Hindu religious tradition, writes of her findings in her book Darshan, Seeing the Divine Image in India. When Hindus go to a temple, they do not commonly say, I am going to worship, but rather, I am going for darshan. They go to see the image of the deity, be it Krishna or Durga, Shiva or Vishnu, present in the sanctum of the temple. The central act of Hindu worship from the point of view of the lay person is to stand in the presence of the deity and to behold the image with one's own eyes, to see and be seen by the deity, to see and be seen. Since in the Hindu understanding the deity is present in the image, the visual apprehension of the image is charged with religious meaning. Beholding the image is an act of worship, and through the eyes one gains the blessings of the divine. Diana Eck tells us how the Hindus travel on pilgrimage for the darshan of sacred places and of temple images. And in addition, they also value the darshan of holy people such as saints, sadhus, holy men, and sannyasins, renouncers. She writes, in popular terminology, Hindus say that the deity or the sadhu gives darshan and the people take darshan. Taking darshan is almost like taking communion. We accept that communion as the body and blood of Christ. So the darshan that we are receiving here this evening is that very essence of the saints. What does this mean? What is given and what is taken? The very expression is arresting, for seeing in this religious sense is not an act which is initiated by the worshipper. Rather, the deity presents itself to be seen in its image, or the sadhu gives himself to be seen by the villagers, and the people receive their darshan. One might say that this sacred perception, which is the ability truly to see the divine image, is given to the devotee, just as Arjuna is given the eyes with which to see Krishna in the theophany described in the Bhagavad Gita. The prominence of the eyes of Hindu divine images also reminds us that it is not only the worshipper who sees the deity, but the deity sees the worshipper as well. Again, the figure eight flow. The contact between devotee and deity is exchanged through the eyes. Hindu divine images are often striking for their large and conspicuous eyes. The famous image of Krishna Jagannath in Puri has enormous saucer-like eyes. When Hindus stand on tiptoe and crane their necks to see through the crowd the image of Lord Krishna, they wish not only to see, but to be seen. They want the deity, even if it is a statue, because for them it is the real deity. They want to be sure that the deity sees us, because as his eyes reach our chakras, reach our hearts, reach us in our bodies, we receive that current from that cosmic being. The huge gaze of the image meets that of the worshipper, and that exchange of vision lies at the heart of Hindu worship. So the gaze of the image, the contact making whole. I have some notes on how I also describe darshan. Darshan means communion, the bonding of the Guru and the Chela through spiritual teachings, spiritual exercises, and service. The energy of the Guru-chela relationship creates a constant flow of devotion between the Guru and the Chela, meeting at the nexus. As the Guru gives energy and light in teaching and focus, the Chela gives back service, and by the support of the Guru, accelerates on the path, balances karma, and accelerates up the spiral of higher and higher being. Darshan is getting right with the Guru, and that means El Morya, Lanello, the messenger. Each one of these three is a Guru, and this entails bringing the soul into alignment with a Holy Christ self and I Am Presence. It is a realigning process that culminates in the soul being centered at the highest levels of her being. When the soul is aligned with the three Gurus, she is ready to taxi down the runway in preparation for launching the soul to levels of immortal being, nevermore to return to mortality. So those are the notes on darshan, and you can truly expand your realization of what takes place when you merely think upon a saint or a divine being, let alone give many mantras to that divine being. Chapter 7, the first initiation, the One Initiator. Most people, when they think of initiation, have in mind a step to be gained for themselves. They think of the initiate as a man who has developed himself very highly and has become a great and glorious figure as compared with the man of the outer world. That is true, but the whole question will be better understood if we try to look down on it from a higher point of view. The importance of initiation does not lie in the exaltation of an individual, but in the fact that he has now become definitely one with a great order, the communion of saints, as it is very beautifully put in the Christian Church, though few ever pay attention to the real meaning of those words. So to become one with a great order, the communion of the saints, that we would entitle the Great White Brotherhood. The stupendous reality that lies behind initiation into the Brotherhood will be better understood after we have considered the organization of the occult hierarchy and the work of the masters to be dealt with in later chapters. The candidate has now become more than an individual man because he is a unit in a tremendous force. Think about a beehive. Think about how all the different levels of and echelons of bees, some are over others, some are under others, there is a queen bee, and so forth and so on. The candidate has now become more than an individual man because he is a unit in a tremendous force, and that tremendous force is the Great White Brotherhood. It is the greatest power on earth. There is no greater power. And the ascended masters who are a part of it are the highest beings that we know who have come to sponsor our planet. So we have the opportunity in this very moment to decide, I will not live my life unto myself. I will not be a lone climber up the mountain, but I will become part of this Great White Brotherhood where everyone is connected to everyone else. And so we form this giant tinker toy apparatus that circles the planet. And at each juncture, there is another soul, you, with the attainment of all past ages that you have garnered. And now you can bring that to bear, not merely for your ascension, which almost seems anticlimactic after what we are going through on earth. But now you are a part of a vast brotherhood. You are reinforced. All of the Great White Brotherhood know you personally, and you know all who are a part of that great holy alliance. So it is something to think about when we look out at the world and we say to ourselves, how do these people make it? What do they do when they're sick, when their karma descends, when calamities befall them, when the weather is bad, when their cattle and their sheep die, and all these things that come upon us to give us lessons. They have their neighbors. They have a certain amount of people who support them, love them, whether relatives or whether friends. But when you think of that kind of association, and then you think about the Great White Brotherhood, you realize that people all over the world are struggling, and neither their neighbors nor heads of state or the mayor or this person or that person is capable of dealing with the problems that we have in the world today. So I cannot guarantee you that everyone in this room is seen by the Ascended Masters as a member of the Great White Brotherhood. A member being that you move with the ranks of saints and ascended beings even while you are in the earth. So we talk about ourselves being a part of the Great White Brotherhood, but to become an initiate and to be initiated, to enter that great brotherhood and to know what it is to share eternal life, that is something else. And we all will come to the realization when we know that we have been called and that we are a candidate and that we are becoming a part of that brotherhood, and eventually we are members of this great august body. On every planet, the solar logos has his representative, acting as his viceroy. On our globe, the title given to this great official is the Lord of the world. He is the head of the brotherhood, and the brotherhood is not only a body of men, each of whom has his own duties to perform, it is also a stupendous unity, a fully flexible instrument in the Lord's hand, a mighty weapon that he can wield. There is a marvelous and incomprehensible plan by which the one, having become many, is now becoming one again. Not that any unit in the whole scheme will lose the least fraction of his individuality or power as a unit, but that he has added to it something 1,000 times greater. He is part of the Lord, part of the body that he wears, the weapon that he uses, the organ upon which he plays, the implement with which he does his work. In all the world there is but one initiator, but in the case of the first and second initiations, it is open to him to depute some other adept to perform the ceremony for him, though even then that officiant turns and calls upon the Lord at the critical moment of the conferring of the degree. This is a very wonderful moment in the candidate's spiritual life, as was explained by the Master Kuthumi when accepting a pupil not long ago. Kuthumi said to him, Now that you have attained the immediate goal of your aspiration, I would exhort you at once to turn your attention to far greater requirements of the next step, that for which you have now to prepare, the entering upon the stream which the Christians call salvation will be the salient point in the long line of your earthly existences, the culmination of 700 lives. Ages ago, by individualization, you entered the human kingdom. In a future which I trust is not remote, you will quit it by the door of adeptship and become a superman. Between these two extremes is no point of greater importance than that initiation towards which you should now turn your thoughts. Not only will it make you safe forever, but it will admit you to that brotherhood which exists from eternity unto eternity, the brotherhood which helps the world. Think then with how great care so wondrous an event should be approached. I would have you keep the glory and the beauty of it constantly before your mind, that you may live in the light of its ideals. Your body is young for so mighty an effort, but you have a rare and splendid opportunity. I want you to take it to the full. I know El Morya would say to you these very same words. The brotherhood. When an ego is initiated, he becomes part of the closest organization in the world. When an ego is initiated. Of course, ego stands for person. He is now one with a vast sea of consciousness of the Great White Brotherhood. For a long time, the new initiate will not be able to understand all that this union implies, and he must penetrate far into the sanctuaries before he can realize how close is the link and how great is that consciousness of the King himself, which all brothers to a certain extent share with him. It is incomprehensible and inexpressible down here. Metaphysical and subtle it is beyond words, but nevertheless a glorious reality, real to such an extent that when we begin to grasp it, everything else seems unreal. We have seen how the accepted pupil may lay his thought beside that of the master. So now may the initiate put his thought beside that of the brotherhood and draw into himself just as much of that tremendous consciousness as he at his level is able to appreciate. And ever as he draws it into himself, he will be able to receive more of it, and his own consciousness will widen out, so that narrowness of thought will become impossible for him. And just as the accepted pupil must take care not to cause disturbance in the lower vehicles of the master, lest he should interfere with the perfection of his work, so must a member of the brotherhood never introduce anything discordant into that mighty consciousness which is acting as a whole. He must remember that not by any means the whole of the brotherhood is doing the same work as our masters. Many of them are engaged in other labors which require the utmost concentration and the most perfect calm. And if some of the younger members should sometimes forget their high calling and cause ripples of annoyance to disturb the brotherhood, it would affect the work of those greater ones. Our own masters might perhaps overlook that and be willing to endure a little occasional worry of that kind for the sake of the future, when the new member will be making really great use of the powers of the brotherhood. But we can quite understand that those who have nothing to do with the training of individuals might say, "Our work is being disturbed, and it is better that those who have such immature personalities should stay outside." They would say that nothing was lost, that progress can be made just as well outside, and that pupils could go on making themselves better and stronger and wiser before gaining initiation. So wonderful is the expansion of the initiate's consciousness that it is most apt to speak of the change as a new birth. How many lifetimes have you had in this life? A new birth. He begins to lead a new life as a little child, the life of the Christ, and the Christ, the intuitional or Buddhic consciousness, is born within his heart. He has also now the power to give the blessing of the brotherhood, a tremendous and overwhelming force which he is able to give or send to anyone as he judges to be most appropriate and useful. The power of the Brotherhood will flow through him just as much as he will let it flow. It is for him to use the power and to remember that he has the entire responsibility of directing it for whatever purpose he may choose. The benediction given by the officiant at initiation means, I bless you, I pour my force and benison into you. See that you in your turn constantly pour out this goodwill upon others. The more confidence the new initiate has, the greater will be the flow of force through him. If he feels the least hesitation or is weighed down by the responsibility of letting such a tremendous power flow through him, he will not be able to use this wonderful gift to the full. But if he has the qualification of Shraddha, perfect trust in his master and in the Brotherhood, and the utter certainty that because he is one with them, all things are possible to him, he may go through the world as a veritable angel of light, shedding joy and benediction around his path. The consciousness of the Great White Brotherhood is an indescribably wonderful thing. It is like a great calm shining ocean, so strangely one that the least thrill of consciousness flashes from end to end of it instantaneously, and yet to each member it seems to be absolutely his own individual consciousness, though with a weight and a power and a wisdom behind it that no single human consciousness could ever have. This magnificent sea of, quote, cosmic consciousness of the Brotherhood is something so great, so wonderful, that there is nothing else in the world like it. Even those who belong to it by virtue of having passed the first great initiation can catch only glimpses of it, can remember only a little of it here and there. It can be felt fully only on the nirvanic plane on which the Brotherhood primarily exists, though it has its manifestation on the lower planes, even down to the physical world. As the band of pupils is all one in the Master, so is the Brotherhood all one in its Lord. The members may freely discuss a point among themselves, yet it is as though different aspects of a case presented themselves in the same mind, and were by that mind weighed one against the other. But one is all the time in the presence of a tremendous and almost awful serenity. Awful meaning awe-filled, filled with awe. An almost awful serenity, a certainty which nothing can ever disturb. And yet somehow in all that every suggestion is welcomed. Indeed, there is the sensation that the whole Brotherhood is alertly and eagerly waiting for each individual's contributions to the subject before it. There is nothing down here to which this consciousness can be adequately compared. To touch it is to come into contact with something new and strange, yet inexpressibly wonderful and beautiful, something which needs no evidence and no comparison, but asserts itself to be of a higher and unknown world. Though individualities are so strangely merged in this, yet are they at the same time sharply separated, for the assent of each brother is required to every decision of importance. The rule of the king is absolute, yet he carries his vast council with him and is at every moment willing to consider any point that occurs to any member of it. But this great governing body differs utterly from any parliament of earth. Those who stand above the rest in positions of authority have not been elected, nor have they been appointed by some party organization. They hold their positions because they have won them by superior development and greater wisdom. None doubts the decision of his superior because he knows that he really is a superior, that he has greater insight and a fuller power to decide. There can be no shadow of compulsion that these supermen shall think or act alike. Yet is their confidence in their mighty organization so perfect that it is unthinkable that in the long run they should differ. It is only in the case of such a brotherhood under such a king that we can fully realize the beautiful wording of one of the collects of the Church of England, "In his service is perfect freedom." Let's say it together. In his service is perfect freedom. In his service is perfect freedom. In his service is perfect freedom. Now we come to failures. In such an organization, there should surely be no possibility of failure or trouble of any sort. And yet, because humanity is frail, and because not all members of this great brotherhood are yet supermen, failures do sometimes occur, although they are very rare. Great ones fall back even from the threshold, unable to sustain the weight of their responsibility, unable to pass on, as is said in Light on the Path, and only the attainment of adeptship ensures perfect safety. The concept of not being able to sustain the weight of one's own responsibility is something we should take up. All of us have different jobs. All of us may have more responsibilities than others. If we fail in our responsibilities, it is for one purpose, one reason. We have not gone to the source or to the heart of God and recognized that it is God that works through us and to his end. So even those who are on the path for some time may forget that they are but instruments. And when they forget that, then they cannot carry their load. So let us remember, all of you who are here and all of you who are moving across the United States to respective places where you will be for some time, remember that God in you is the doer. And if you try to do it, ultimately you will fail, and it will be the cause of your failure. So please give the glory of your service and work to God, so that you will never be caught in this situation where you saw yourself as the doer and couldn't do the doing, and therefore you failed. The initiator tells the candidate that now he has entered upon the stream, he is safe forever. But although that is so, it is still possible for him to delay his progress to a most serious extent if he yields to any of the temptations that still beset his path. To be safe forever is usually taken to betoken the certainty of passing onward with a present life wave, of not being left behind at the day of judgment, which comes in the middle of the fifth round, when the Christ who has descended into matter decides what souls can and what souls cannot be carried on to final attainment in this chain of worlds. There is no eternal condemnation. It is, as the Christ said simply, aeonian. There are some who cannot go on in this age or dispensation, but they will follow along in the next, precisely as a child who is too dull to succeed in this year's class will drift comfortably along in next year's and will probably even be at the head of it. When the sad and terrible thing does occur, when there is a failure of any sort among initiates, a thrill of pain runs through the whole of that vast consciousness, for the separation of one from the rest is of the nature of a veritable surgical operation, tearing the heartstrings of all. Only with the uttermost regret does the brotherhood ever thus sever a member from itself, and even when it does, so the erring brother is not finally cut off, however far he may stray. He will be brought back again sometime, somewhere, somehow. There is a link that cannot be broken, although we know little of the weary road of trial and suffering that he must tread before he can again weld it together with the rest. So the teaching we should remember and etch somewhere on our books: it is possible to fail. That has to ever be before us. Sometimes we take for granted that we will have our victory, but we must never be too sure of ourselves, because even the smallest amount of pride can take us from our victory. it is possible to fail. Put it somewhere prominently in your house. You can get very caught up in seeing yourself way high up there with the Brotherhood, but you're not there until you're there. Until the very last moment before your ascension, you can still fail. The first initiation, the voice of the silence remains within him, and though he leave the path utterly, yet one day it will resound and rend him asunder and separate his passions from his divine possibilities. Then with pain and desperate cries from the deserted lower self, he will return. Now this point of people failing and leaving the path, this is where they come to the crossroads, and they look at the mountain of karma that is behind them, and they look to the future, and they see what they will have to do, such arduous work, such back-breaking work to get back where they were, that many of them who are weak in spirit, weak-willed, say, I cannot do it. It is not worth it. I will take the second death. So that is how the second death comes along, where a person has built up such a mass of karma that they just do not have the heart. They really do not have the fire of heart to want to take, as long as it's going to take, even millions of years to get back to God. They just don't have the heart for it. And I've known any numbers of people like that. And I found that when it came to the end of the road for them, there was nothing I could do for them. I remember a scene somewhere in Solvang or somewhere in California where I was talking to a Chela who'd been a part of the community for a number of years. And he said he no longer wanted to be a part of the community. He really didn't want God. I don't really know what he wanted, but he was vacating his house. So I sat down on the floor and crossed my legs, and he sat down on the floor and crossed his legs. And I said everything I could say to this person, and this person said, I don't want it. I don't want it. It's a very sad day when I meet people like that. I think I've told you the story about the guy crossing the road, New York City somewhere, and me tapping his shoulder and asking him if he wanted his entities removed. Did I ever tell you this one? Well, I did this because I saw this guy and I saw these entities on his back, and I said, gee, I could help this guy out, you know. So I went up to him and said, you know, would you like your entities removed? He said, no, I need my entities, you know. They keep me going. Don't do anything for me. And he just kept on going. Didn't miss a beat. When you're very young, you're naive, you know. When you're older, you get to understand these things a little better. I was really amazed, though, that anybody in this world who, when offered, would not give up their entities. So here we are. Others there be who fall away only for a short time, through some outburst of such feeling as is quite impossible for the Brotherhood to endure. Then, just as a master may drop a temporary veil between himself and an erring disciple, so the Brotherhood finds it necessary to make for it a time a sort of cyst round one of its members who fails it. The whole force of the Brotherhood is turned upon one who is failing in that way, so that, if it be at all possible, they may prevent him from overstepping the boundary. But sometimes, even in spite of all the strength which the Brotherhood is permitted by the law of karma to use, a member still declines to give up his petty, personal attitude of supposed injury or offense, or whatever it may be, then they must encyst him for a while until he learns better. Does anybody know what encyst means? It sounds like they create a cyst and he's sealed inside of it. Does anybody know what that meaning of that word is, specifically encyst? So it looks like he's wrapped up in himself until he is going to either get back on the path or never get back on the path again. And seriously speaking, we never know when we are on our final opportunity to make our ascension. We never know that. So if we take the ascension for granted, we take anything for granted from the Great White Brotherhood, we may come to that day when we don't have any money in the bank to pay for our journey to the Great Central Sun. In other words, we have not stored anything away to carry us where we're going. So I counsel you to be profoundly humble every day of your life before your God, and be grateful for the smallest favors and the large. The initiator's charge. The formula of initiation has been unchanged throughout the ages, yet there is a certain elasticity about it. The initiator's charge to the candidate is always the same so far as the first part of it goes, but almost invariably there is a second and personal part which consists practically of advice to the particular candidate who is going through. This is usually called the private part of the charge. I have also seen instances in which an image is made of the candidate's worst enemy, and he is asked how he would deal with him, whether he is fully prepared to forgive him absolutely and even help him. In some cases also, questions are asked as to the work already done by the candidate, and those who have been helped by him are sometimes invited to come forward and bear witness. The initiator's charge explains the work of the Brotherhood in the world and the responsibility which rests on each member individually, for each has to share in the bearing of the great burden of the sorrows of the world. The sorrows of the world. Each must be ready to help both by service and by counsel, for it is one brotherhood acting under one law and one head, although the rule of the king is absolute. No decision of importance is taken without the consent of even the youngest member of the Brotherhood. Each is a representative of the Brotherhood in whatever part of the world he may be, and each is pledged to be at the disposal of the Brotherhood, to go wherever he is sent, to work in any way that is required. If you remember when you first read about Leadbeater in the very beginning of this course, Leadbeater was well trained. He had standing in the Church of England and a good education. He gave up his fiancée. He gave up being a dignitary in the Church of England. He put everything behind him for the cause of the Brotherhood. You could think of more difficult tasks. Think about that. There are many difficult tasks that you might have to undergo in order to balance 100% of your karma, if that is your goal in this life, even balancing 51%. So although this may seem harsh in the life of Leadbeater, yet he chose it, and in so choosing, balanced a tremendous amount of karma. While younger members will naturally implicitly obey the heads, they may yet help by local knowledge and may always suggest anything that seems to them of possible use. Each brother living in the world must remember that he is a center through which the force of the king. When we say the king, let us say in our minds Sanat Kumara, so we have a vivid image of the highest hierarch that we are aware of in our lineage, through which the force of Sanat Kumara may be sent for the helping of those who are in need, and that any older brother may at any time use him as a channel for his blessing. Therefore, each younger brother should always be ready to be so used at any moment, for he never can tell when his services may be required. The life of the brother should be one of entire devotion to others. He should watch eagerly and incessantly for every opportunity of rendering service, and let such service be his keenest joy. He must remember that the honor of the Brotherhood is in his hands, and he must see to it that no word or act of his shall ever sully it in the eyes of men or cause them to think of it one whit less highly. He must not think that because he has entered the stream, Trial and struggle will cease for him. On the contrary, he will have to make still greater efforts, but he will have greater strength to make them. His power will be far greater than before, but in exactly the same proportion, his responsibility is greater also. He must remember that it is not he, a separated self, who has gained a step which has lifted him above his fellows. Rather, he should rejoice that humanity through him has risen a little, has freed itself to this small extent from its chains, has come into this much more of its own. The blessing of the Brotherhood is ever with him, but it will descend upon him precisely in the measure in which he passes it on to others, for this is the eternal law. That is part of the charge which is always given. So you can accelerate as much as you want to accelerate. The blessing of the Brotherhood descends upon you every day, precisely in the measure in which you pass that blessing on to others. So you see, you can accelerate tremendously in 24 hours. You can make decisions to leave off of lesser things that may have been a part of your life for centuries. We are extremely flexible, pliable in these bodies we wear. We can make an about face and say, I don't like the direction I've been going in. I don't like to hear the way I speak to people. I don't like this thing about myself. I've had it for 10 embodiments. It's going today. Today is the day I'm sending this thing into the flame. So you see, you can be anybody you want to be. You can go anywhere, do anything. All the while you are intensifying that heart fire within you until that heart fire becomes a cauldron of sacred fire. You dip into it, you internalize it. You must have the image that I have for you, that you can become walking adepts on behalf of the Brotherhood right now, right in this moment. I would like to give you a moment of quiet prayer while we have soft music, so that you can talk to God and the members of the Great White Brotherhood in Sanat Kumara and ask God to help you do what you really want to do, and especially to increase in attainment. You see, in order to have attainment, you must serve, and you must multiply service exponentially until you are so increasing your momentum that you have much more to give to the world and much more to give to the masters. The masters have given us so much, and we give them a pittance back. And I say that because we do it because we become discordant. The little things that go on in the daytime and we get into our human consciousness, that kind of stuff steals from us our light. So let's pray now. The length of the ceremony. The time occupied by the ceremony of initiation varies according to several considerations, one of which is the amount of knowledge that the candidate brings with him. Some traditions put the period as 3 days and nights, but it is often finished in much less time. One at which I was present took 2 nights and a day of seclusion, but others have been condensed into 1 night, by leaving much that used to be included to be finished later by the higher pupils of the masters. Some of the old initiations lasted so long because the candidates had to be instructed in astral work. There are also Buddhic experiences which must be realized, for a certain amount of development of the Buddhic vehicle is required for initiation. Your Buddhic vehicle is what they're talking about, as some of the teachings which must be given at that level could not otherwise be understood. But when the initiator knows that the candidate has already some Buddhic development, it has several times been left to older pupils to carry the candidates through the Buddhic experiences on the following night, or whenever it could be arranged. The actual ceremony of initiation takes less than 6 hours, but a certain amount of time is given to the candidates both before and afterwards. Generally, it is an occasion of great rejoicing, at any rate among all the younger members. It is a victory for all when another neophyte is admitted, when one more is safe forever. Sunship. We have already spoken of the close relation between an accepted pupil and his master. All the time, this intimacy has been steadily growing, and it usually happens that when the pupil is approaching the portal of initiation, the master considers that the time is ripe for him to draw the chela into a still deeper union. He is then called the son of the master, and the link is such that not only the lower mind, but also the ego in the causal body of the pupil is enfolded within that of the adept, and the latter can no longer draw a veil to cut off the neophyte. A wise Frenchman once said, "Dans tous les amours, il y a un qui aime et un qui se laisse être aimé." So in all loves, there is one who loves, and there is one who allows himself to be loved. This is profoundly true in 9 cases out of 10 in human love. Often the reason for it is that one of the 2 souls concerned is greater and more developed than the other, and therefore capable of a far deeper love. The younger soul appreciates that wealth of affection and returns it to the extent of his capacity, but his best effort falls far short of the wonderful gift poured out so easily and naturally by his elder. Always that must be the case with regard to the master and his pupil. So in other words, the ascended masters give us far more love than we have the capacity to give them our love. Another point, the affection with which we meet in ordinary life is not infrequently unstable, fluctuating, capable of ready discouragement. It may be alienated by coldness, unkindness, lack of response. It may even be changed into dislike of its object, violates our canons of conduct, or acts in some ways that horrifies or disgusts us. But there is a truer and deeper affection that nothing can shake, a love which recks nothing of response, which is utterly unaffected by neglect, indifference, or even unworthiness on the part of its object, which would indeed feel bitter anguish and regret if that object committed a crime or disgraced himself in any way, but would never for a moment decrease in strength, would lose not a simple degree of its fervency, whatever the loved one might do. Of that nature is the love of God for his world. Of that nature also must be the love of the Master for those to whom he gives the ineffable privilege of sonship. He trusts them wholly. He voluntarily resigns the power to separate them from himself, because only by that utter and unbreakable union with them is he enabled to share with them his own nature to the very fullest extent of their power of response. Only by this sacrifice of himself can he give them the utmost which a pupil can receive from a master. Thus it may truly be said that he puts himself at the mercy of his pupil. Just think of the awful responsibility which that throws upon us. Rare though it be, such love is found sometimes among men in this our physical world too. But when it exists, it has always that same quality and that same result. It places the higher in the hands of the lower, so that the supremest love is ever also the supremest sacrifice. Yet this utter sacrifice, this utmost resignation of the self, brings with it a keener joy than aught else on earth can confer. For such love alone is God-life. Such self-surrender bears the man into the very heart of Christ. Indeed, it is true that such love shall cover the multitude of sins, that her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. And that is the reference of Mary Magdalene. There is a beautiful reference to this state of closest union in Light on the Path, where it is written, "My peace I give unto you," can only be said by the Master to the beloved disciples who are as himself. And so these are they who have the inestimable privilege of being able to pass on that peace to others in all its fullness. Any accepted pupil of the Master has the right and the duty to bless in his name, and a splendid outpouring of the Master's power will assuredly follow his effort to do so. Especially should he give that blessing mentally whenever he enters a house. May the blessing of the Master rest on this house and on all who live therein. But the Son of the Master can give the very touch of his intimate presence a fuller and a greater peace. He who is a son of the Master either is or soon will be a member of the Great White Brotherhood also, and that, as we have said, gives the power to wield an even greater blessing, though both are appropriate, each in its place. I well remember giving each of those on different occasions to a great angel of the neighborhood with whom I have the honor to be well acquainted. Passing close to his territories in a vessel, I gave him once as a greeting the full blessing of my Master, and it was indeed beautiful to see the way in which he received it, bowing profoundly and showing his appreciation by a lovely soft glow of holiness and uttermost devotion. Another day, under similar circumstances, I gave him the blessing of the Brotherhood, and instantly every power of that great angel flashed out in glad response, and the whole of his territory lit up. It was as though a soldier had leapt to attention, as though everything not only within himself, but in all the thousands of minor creatures working under him, had suddenly been vivified and raised to its highest power. All nature instantly responded. You see, my Master, however deeply reverenced by him, is not his Master, but my King is his King, for there is but one. The level of initiation. The question as to whether a man is approaching fitness for initiation involves three separate sets of considerations, all depending upon one another. The first is as to whether he is in possession of a sufficient amount of the necessary qualifications as laid down in At the Feet of the Master, and that means that he must have a minimum of all and very much more than a minimum of some of them. To illustrate this, think for a moment of the method adopted in marking papers at certain examinations. It is determined beforehand by the examiners that no candidate shall be allowed to pass who falls below a certain minimum in each of the subjects. But the percentage required in each subject is very low, say 25%. Anyone who fails to secure 25% of the marks in any subject will fail. But nevertheless, one who secures exactly that amount in each of the subjects will not succeed, for not only are separate minima set for the different subjects, but there is also a total minimum, let us say 40%. One, therefore, who falls as low as 25 or 30% in one or two of his subjects must make very much more than that in several other subjects in order to attain the average required. This is precisely the method adopted in occultism. There must be a certain amount of each of these qualifications present in the successful candidate, but he must have very thoroughly developed some of them. A candidate cannot succeed if he be entirely lacking in discrimination. Yet if he shows much less of that than he should, an overflowing flood of love may perhaps be accepted as atoning for it. Secondly, the ego must have so trained his lower vehicles that he can function perfectly through them when he wishes to do so. He must have effected what in our earlier theosophical literature was called the junction of the lower and the higher self. And thirdly, he must be strong enough to stand the great strain involved, which extends even to the physical body. As to the level of progress at which he will be initiated, there is room for very great variety. It would be a mistake to suppose that all initiates are equal in development, just as it would be unsafe to assume that all men who have taken the degree of Master of Arts are equal in knowledge. It is quite possible that a candidate might have done exceedingly well in many of the qualities required, and be far beyond the total minimum, and yet be seriously deficient and below the minimum standard in one subject. It would then, of course, be necessary for him to wait till he had the minimum in that neglected subject, and no doubt while he was acquiring that, he would be developing the others still further. It is therefore obvious that while there is a certain attainment required for initiation, some of those who are presented for it may have achieved far more than that in some directions. We see, too, that there is likely to be considerable variation in the interval between initiations. One man who has just now been able to take the first may nevertheless possess a considerable share of the qualifications for the second. Therefore, for him, the interval between the two might be unusually short. On the other hand, a candidate who had only just sufficient strength in all directions to enable him to pass through the first would have slowly to develop within himself all the additional faculties and knowledge necessary for the second, so his interval would probably be long. The present opportunity. We have now entered upon a period in the world's history in which progress at all levels of evolution can be very rapid. Rapid progress is, however, a very decided strain, a thing which few aspirants sufficiently realize. The student of occultism who sets before himself the idea of hastening his development will do well to remember that one of the necessities is good physical health. He wishes to make in one life the progress which under ordinary circumstances would be distributed over 20 or more, and as the amount that has to be done is the same in either case, for no reduction whatever has been made in the standard of the requirements for initiation, it is obvious that he must work all his vehicles very much harder if he is to succeed. It is possible on the physical plane to shorten the period of study usually assigned to any given examination, but a man can do it only by putting a far greater tax upon his brain, his attention, his eyesight, his power of endurance, and we all know how fatally easy it is for him to strain himself in any one of these directions and thereby seriously to injure his physical health. Similar conditions attend upon the efforts to hasten spiritual evolution. It can be done, and it has been done, and it is a very fine thing for any man to do, always with this proviso, that he must watch very carefully against overstrain, lest in the ultimate he should delay his development instead of advancing it. It is not sufficient to have good physical health at the beginning of one's endeavor. It is also necessary to preserve it unto the end, for the progress itself is but a means to an end, and we try to develop ourselves not that we may become great and wise, but that we may have the power and the knowledge to work for humanity to the best effect. We must never forget that occultism is above all the apotheosis of common sense. Here we go to the young initiates. It is always the ego who is initiated. Isn't it so? What's our ego going to do today, tomorrow, in some encounter? You have to catch it by the tail, don't you? It is always the ego who is initiated. The age of the physical body, which it happens to be holding at a given time, has little to do with the case. In all cases, when young people have been initiated, elder members of the Brotherhood living near to them or in touch with them in the physical body have undertaken to assist and guide them. This is necessary because of the great responsibility that initiation brings, along with its expansion of consciousness and additional faculty and power. A wrong action or a false step on the part of an initiate involves bigger karmic consequences than a similar action on the part of one who is not a member of the Brotherhood. When we are given responsibility, we find that we have greater karmic consequences because we are responsible. Therefore, perhaps it will be well to include here a few directions for these younger people. Each one should ever remember that he was initiated because in past lives, and perhaps in the present one, he has helped the world to a certain requisite degree, and it is hoped that he will continue in that path and become an even larger channel for the life of the Logos. It is because of the probability of his increased usefulness that he is admitted to initiation, and at the ceremony he takes the pledge, not only as the ego but as the monad, that he will make it his life work to pour himself out in blessing, even as the Logos is continually streaming forth his love. He must therefore each day and hour keep this pledge in mind and subserve all things to it. His karma from the past gives him various personal characteristics and impulses. He must take heed lest these drive him to think of himself and his own well-being rather than of the greater self and the welfare of the world. Before he can undertake the larger work waiting him, the youthful initiate has often to prepare himself by an ordinary training in college and university. In that case, he will be plunged into circumstances of vigorous activity and many self-centered interests. Life surrounds him with many temptations and with occasions tending to make him forget his pledge to the Brotherhood. Through them all, he must have a clearly defined attitude, a clear mission, that he is thrown in his lot with the aims of the Brotherhood. In that life in the world, on every occasion, whether of study, recreation, or amusement, he must definitely hold the thought, is this that I am going to do likely to make me better equipped for the Master's work or a better channel to spread love and happiness? In other words, there has to be something that's greater than oneself. He must always remember that the Brotherhood has the first claim on his services and must never put himself in any position which makes it impossible for him to fulfill his duty to it. It is not intended that he should live the life of a hermit, but while he lives that life in society which will give him the growth he requires, he must all the time watch to see whether it is making him more of a channel for the Logos. Henceforth, for him, any experience, however pleasant and harmless, which cannot make a fuller channel of the Logos or give an opportunity for service, is valueless to him and is so much waste of time. He should try to take advantage of every opportunity to help that he sees and to learn such things as will make him useful. The conclusion of this chapter is the initiate brother to all. When the pupil takes the great step of initiation and becomes a member of the Brotherhood, he also becomes, in a far greater and more special sense than before, the brother of every one of his fellow men. This does not mean that he must direct their lives and try to guide them with criticism. It is not his business in life to criticize, but to encourage. But if he sees reason to make any suggestion, he must do it with the very greatest care and courtesy. The world does not see the higher members of the Brotherhood. Therefore, it is apt to judge that organization by the junior members who come within its purview. That is what is meant by the remark in the charge at initiation that the neophyte holds the honor of the Brotherhood in his hands. This could be said of all of us. Our behavior, our standards, our honesty, our virtues are telling the world what the Brotherhood is all about. If we were exalted beings that never came out of the Himalayas and so forth, the world would not know about the Great White Brotherhood. So let us think of ourselves as neophytes here and realize that if the Great White Brotherhood is to be well known, it will be by our example, not by our words. It is his duty to stream forth love and benedictions so that every place in which he happens to be is happier because of his presence. He must therefore steadily turn outwards. Henceforth it does not matter to him what judgment the world gives on his actions, but only what judgment the Brotherhood gives. Whether he is popular or unpopular with the world matters not at all, if through all his conduct he has been loyal to the ideals placed before him. Some senior members of the Brotherhood may desire to use him at any moment, wherever he happens to be, and sometimes without his knowing it in the brain consciousness, but he cannot be used if, at the moment when he is needed, he is found brooding over his own affairs and turned inwards, not outwards, to the world. The supreme need for him is the building of character so that when his master looks at him, he will find him thinking of the world's welfare and not whether the world is giving him happiness or misery. This is on page 94. I would like you to consider this page well. This will tell us a lot about ourselves, and I think we need to go back to it. So it's my page 94. The opposite, it's in the chapter called Acceptance, and it's opposite the heading, The Attitude of the Disciple. I think this page in this book has probably had the greatest meaning to me of the entire book itself. And of all that I have been taught or received from the Brotherhood at inner or outer levels, I felt that having this information was the most important piece of information that I could have to understand the decisions that all of us have to make, albeit different kinds of decisions. The decision I'm talking about is the decision to climb up the ladder of the Great White Brotherhood, to realize that we really have within our being a tremendous momentum of sacred fire, and that if we direct it well, we can bring tremendous light to the world. So I'm going to read from page 94. This is about the accepted pupil. Whether or not we are accepted, whether or not we are going to become chelas with a capital C, depends on our understanding of this page. So I'll read it. The accepted pupil thus becomes an outpost of the Master's consciousness, an extension of him, as it were. Let us consider, if we don't believe in ourselves today, that in the future that we look to, we will do what this page says. So here's the accepted pupil. I want you to accept that you are a pupil of the Ascended Masters and the Great White Brotherhood. Claim that title, then live up to it. The accepted pupil thus becomes an outpost of the Master's consciousness. Do you consider yourself an outpost of El Morya's consciousness? Do you think about it every day? I'm an extension of my Master. I want you to start thinking about it every day. I want you to think about it that you are an extension of your Guru, the Ascended Master El Morya. The adept sees, hears, and feels through him, so that whatever is done in his presence is done in the Master's presence. This does not mean that the Great One is necessarily always conscious of such events at the time when they are going on, though he may be so. He may be absorbed in some other work at the time. Nevertheless, the events are in his memory afterwards. What the pupil has experienced with reference to a particular subject will come up in the Master's mind among his own knowledge when he turns his attention to that subject. So once you become an accepted pupil and an extension of an Ascended Master, that Master keeps his eye on you. And earlier in the book, they are speaking of a statue of ourselves that seems to be somewhere between the etheric plane and the mental plane, so that every pupil that a master takes on, he creates that form that is identical. I think you all remember this teaching. The point here is that when the student is in trouble, when the student's vibrations go down, when the student's vibrations go up, all is felt by the master, because we are on the umbilical cord of the master. We are an extension of him. And he is furthering the bonding process with our Lord Jesus Christ, with our Holy Christ self. So the master is always aware of you, but may not, nevertheless not focus attention on you. But he will come back to that image he has created of you, and in looking at that image will know your state of consciousness, whether you are in danger, whether you are in exalted state, whether you have gone to this place or that place. So this is the next paragraph that is built on this first. When a pupil sends a thought of devotion to his master, the slight flash which he sends produces an effect like the opening of a great valve, and there is a tremendous downflow of love and power from the master. If one sends out a thought of devotion to one who is not an adept, it becomes visible as a fiery stream going to him. But when such a thought is directed by a pupil to his master, the pupil is immediately deluged by a stream of fiery love from the master. The adept's power is flowing outwards always and in all directions like the sunlight, but the touch of the pupil's thought draws down a prodigious stream of it upon him for the moment. So perfect is the union between the master and the pupil, that if there is any serious disturbance in the lower bodies of the pupil, it will affect also those of the master. And as such, vibration would interfere with the adept's work on higher planes. When this unfortunately happens, he has to drop a veil that shuts the pupil off from himself until such time as the storm settles down. So what this is telling us is that if we are going to be an extension of the master and maintain a status of accepted pupil, which is what we're praying for at this time, maybe some of us have achieved that at inner levels, maybe some of us have not. But if we are extensions of the master, then we must bring to him our highest self at all times. So when the pupil gets out of sorts and gets discordant, that discordant vibration that is part of the pupil who's tied to the master is now going to affect the master. So if the pupil keeps on being discordant and causing upheavals and disturbances, finally the adept has to sever the tie from this pupil. And so the book says, it is of course sad for the pupil when he has to be cut off in this manner, but it is absolutely his own doing, and he can end the separation at once as soon as he can control his thoughts and feelings. Usually such an unfortunate incident does not last longer than 48 hours, but I have known cases much worse than that, in which the rift endured for years and even for the remainder of that incarnation. But these are extreme cases and very rare, for it is little likely that a person capable of such defection would be received as a pupil at all. What I'm saying here is that we draw a horizontal line. We can draw the line up here, we can draw the line down here, but we have to draw a line for ourselves, and we have to say, I will not go down further in vibration than this line I have drawn. Let's say you draw a line from the 3 to the 9 o'clock line. And you say to yourself, I will keep the harmony. I will maintain my inner centeredness, and I will not be moved, because the master has received me as his chela. And if I bring discord into my being by allowing someone else's discord to come into my being, then to go through me and to go all the way to the master, then I am failing the master. So I came to the realization that if we are going to serve El Morya, and our goal is to be his personal, most intimate chela, one with his heart, then we cannot be tied to people who are discordant, because that discord will then come through us, the master will receive it. He will then have to bear our burden, which he shouldn't have to bear. So I came to the realization that if you climb the spiral staircase from the seat of the soul chakra to the secret chamber of the heart, as you go up those levels and you want to maintain your tie to El Morya, and you love the master so much and you know what his burdens are and you do not want to burden him anymore, then all you can do is to let go of people, circumstances, conditions, situations that are discordant, and you can't let them in your world, and you have to tell people that you cannot be any part of this discord that is going on. So I realized in reading Leadbeater's book that we have a choice to stay at this level of our human personality and interact with other human personalities, or we let go of those discordant ones and we seal ourselves in light. And if we are sealed in light and we keep that light and we do our decrees and we work with our inner child and we work with our issues and our psychology, then we can pretty well observe ourselves and know where our weak points are. We may have a weakness, we may have an opening, but because we know the techniques of our psychology and because we have wonderful help in our practitioners, we can quickly get back on the straight and narrow path. And when the master sees us striving to come up higher and to come up to him, he will tutor us at inner levels. He will carry us, he will help us. But if we have chained ourselves to persons, places, conditions, things, wants, desires, unfulfilled hopes, dreams, etc., we won't have this marvelous thing of being the accepted pupil and an extension of El Morya. When I read this so marvelously written, it was very clear to me that not just myself, but all of us here and every Chela in the world must strive for this, must make himself so purged and purified, and whatever you have to do to resolve your inner issues, so that El Morya can say, you are a part of him. You are his Chela with a capital C. And he has nothing to be worried about because you have committed yourself to be harmonious at all times in his presence, to uphold him, to move with him, to love him, to comfort him, and so forth. So we have a master who has a tremendous magnet of the central sun. And so we can pull on that magnet and we can rise higher. Rising higher on one's being demands sacrifice, and it is very painful because we leave behind the old world and we enter the new. You can't take the old world with you, the old situations, the old burdens, the old concerns. So you have to get rid of your sympathetic ties. Think of the word sympathy. Do you think El Morya would allow you to be sympathetic toward him? To have sympathy for him? Of course not. So every day we make the choice. Are we going to sit in the old routine? We're going to get out of it and say, the most glorious thing on the whole wide world for me is to be a servant of my Lord, a servant in the heart of El Morya. And I think you will see tremendous acceleration. We have to let go of what we think is important in this world, because it really isn't. I'm ready to take whatever you'd like to say from the lectern. So, and I'd like you to tell your story, Dorothy. Can you come and tell your story? This is a most wonderful story, and it's a real event in Dorothy's life. And what will happen, Dorothy, you will get a nice transcript of what you told me today, in which I was profoundly engrossed. This is Dorothy Angleton, and she has taken care of my children since they were very, very small, and now she's moving on to Minneapolis.
remember all I'm supposed to tell you. This January, not this January, last January, I made a fiat that I would not cough after this year. I said, this is it. I'm not going to cough anymore after this year. I've had a cough for 12 years, and no medicine, no treatment of any kind, and I've had everything under the sun. Wouldn't even touch it, so, I mean, I could feel better for a day, and then it would all come back, and I'd be coughing again. So I decided it's a record. It has to be a record. It's not a disease. So after I made the fiat, I wondered, well, what am I going to do about it? You know, I'll have to. There must be something that I'm supposed to do. So I went to a book on my shelf that I had never been able to get into before. I bought it probably 2 or 3 years before that, and it was Martin Rossman's book, Healing Through Imagery. So I had tried to read it a couple times, and I just said, I don't like this book. I don't know why I bought it. So I put it back on the shelf, and this time I decided I'd read it, and it was exactly the right time, because it meant everything. And so I tried the relaxation meditation and felt very good. And then I went on about my work and so forth, and then I decided I would. Then I read on a little farther, and he said, the advanced one, after you're comfortable with this meditation, then you should try the advanced one, which is going down, I guess, from your mental body to your heart, going down some steps. He says, visualize yourself going down some steps. You go into a room, which I thought, well, that must be the secret chamber of the heart. And in the room, you'll find your inner teacher. And he will tell you what to do to get rid of this record, or to contact this record and to work through it. So I did that. I went in, I did the relaxation, and then I went down the steps. And of course, I go into the inner chamber of my heart, which I'm very familiar with. I designed it myself. And there on my altar stood Jesus. And I was surprised, but I was just overjoyed, because there was Jesus to help me. So I began pouring out my heart and telling him, I really want to contact this record. I really, you're the one that's supposed to help me. And he didn't say a word to me. And I thought, something's missing here. So I looked at him, and I didn't know what to do. So I turned around, went back out, went back up the steps, and I opened my eyes. The first thing I see is Jesus' picture on my wall. And I got immediately the clue. You're supposed to make a commitment. So I said, oh, that makes sense. All right, Jesus, I will do anything you want me to do. I will go through anything you want me to go through. I will suffer anything you want me to suffer to get to this record. And so 6 days later, I came down with pneumonia, but we didn't know it was pneumonia yet. And they took an X-ray, but there was the radiologist didn't detect pneumonia. So I was given medicine for bronchitis, and I went home, and I felt a little better for a couple of days. Then I began feeling worse and worse and worse, and so finally I asked Dr. Pollack for another round of that medicine, because I was feeling bad again, and so he gave me some more of it, and I kept getting worse and worse really fast then. And finally, after about 3 weeks, I felt really sick, and I was up in the morning, and I had this horrible, excruciating pain in my chest, and I said to myself, that felt like a knife. And then I said to myself, no, a tomahawk. And I said, why did you say that? That's a grim thought. And so I said, it was a difficult thing to get where I was supposed to be after that, because I called headquarters to see if I could find somebody to help me, and I wanted to find Jean Ellis, and I knew she'd know what to do. I couldn't even think. I hurt so much, and I couldn't breathe. Could only breathe in little tiny gasps. And I thought I was really going to lie there and die, but the operator said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." And so she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I can't breathe." So she said, "Oh, I'll call the center right away." So I hung the phone up, and right at that minute, it rang, and it was Ruth Bolton calling me by mistake. And she said, "Dorothy, is that you?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "Ruth, come quick." And she said, "Why? What's wrong?" I said, "I can't breathe." She said, "I'll be right over." So she hung up the phone, ran all the way over to my room, and threw open the door, ran to my bed, and knelt down and started giving me a treatment. And so she explained that she had been calling somebody else, and she dialed my number by mistake, and so then she could run over and help me. And just after she had been giving me this treatment for a little while, well, she said, "I don't really know why I'm giving this treatment." She said, "I've never done this one before, this mother's touch, you know." So she said, "I'm getting a lot of pain out of it." And I said, "It's helping my pain." And so just then Hildegard came running in with a message that she'd gotten over the telephone, of course, and said, "Dr. Pollack wants you to go immediately for an x-ray." And so finally, you know, I got to the hospital for an x-ray, and the doctor discovered that it was pneumonia. And he didn't tell me that part of my lung had collapsed, but he said it was pneumonia, and there had been pneumonia the first x-ray. And so he told me what medicine to take and so forth, and gave me pain medicine. So I went home, and I was better in just a few days, and I decided, you know, having said that funny thing to myself about the tomahawk, I said, I better go back into the meditation again and see what's going on, see if this is part of that. So I did, and I saw the whole scenario. I saw the whole scene of the record, and it was a very funny thing. The first scene of it was me lying in a covered wagon, and I was expecting a baby, but I was just lying there all by myself somewhere on a prairie. And I had seen that scene at least 3 times before, and one time before I ever heard of reincarnation, and it was just before my first child was born. And here I am lying in a covered wagon expecting a baby, and nobody around to help me. And I said, "Oh, that's a horrible thing." I said, "That's just something to make me scared of having this baby. I'm not going to be scared of having this baby. She's going to be born in a hospital, and I have a doctor, and nothing's going to happen." So I wiped it out of my mind. I wouldn't look at it. I said, I won't even think about that. Next time I saw it was after my second child was born. I said, "That again." I thought, I can't believe this scene haunting me like this. And so I wiped it out again. Next time I saw it, I said, "This thing is following me, and I don't understand it." So this time, I finally understood it. It was real, and it was that I could see the covered wagons all circled, and the men were out, you know, with their rifles, and the women that were healthy were helping load the rifles and everything, and the Indians were attacking. So it was my husband made me stay in the wagon, you know, hiding there, and there was such a noise, a horrible noise of the battle, the guns firing, the Indians yelling and screaming, and everything. It was just a din, and so suddenly it was quiet, and I said, "Now what?" And I said, "Why isn't somebody coming to help me?" And so pretty soon I heard Indian voices, and I said, "Oh no, they won, and now they're just going to kill me." And so I just lay there, and then sure enough, an Indian jumped on the wagon where I was, and threw open the curtain, and then he saw the bed, and he must have seen that somebody was in it, so he threw back the covers. He was just furious. He was so angry, And he grabbed me under my arms, dragged me over the whole wagon, and, out, and then to the ground, flung me on the ground, and took out his tomahawk and slammed me in the chest. And it didn't kill me. It was on the right side, and he had missed my heart. But, I could hardly breathe. I was just looking at him, and he was so angry that I was still looking at him that he took his tomahawk again and slammed me in the forehead. And then of course I was dead, and I was out of my body, and I was standing there. I was watching the other Indians come racing up to him, and they were furious. They were mad at him, and they said, "Why did you kill her? Our instructions were not to kill any women or children." Their ranks were diminishing with all their battles, and so they said they had found five children in the other wagons that they had taken. They were going to take home, and I saw those little children, and I saw them coming up to this Indian and punching him in the chest and being so aggravated with him. And they said, "You're going to be disgraced in front of the whole tribe tonight." They tied him up. They tied his hands and back of him, put him on a horse, and away they all went. And right then the angels had come to take me, and so I said, "I can't go yet. I have to forgive that man. He killed me in anger. He didn't even know me. He just was angry. And so I have to forgive him. I have to tell him I forgive him." And they said, "No, you can't do that now." And I said, "But I have to." And they said, "No, you can't now. You have to come with us." So as we were going up over the battle scene, I saw my husband's body, and I knew he wasn't there. And I said, "Where's my husband?" And they said, "Well, he's in a beautiful place, and he's healing." And I said, "Oh." And then I asked about my baby. And they said, "Your baby was taken with the first blow of the tomahawk." And so I was content then, and I went with him. And I don't remember seeing the temple or anything that we went to, but I did see myself coming back on another day, and we were coming not back to the wagon scene, but back to an Indian camp. And as we descended, I could see, the Indians were walking about, and the little children were there, and everybody was going about his business and about his work. And I saw up on a little hill, I knew exactly where I should go. I saw on a little hill a teepee with steam coming out of it. And it occurred to me that that's a sweat lodge, and he was in there to have, a vision and show some remorse for what he had done, because he was disgraced for disobeying orders. And so I went in there. I just floated in, and he looked up and he saw me and he recognized me. He started screaming. His eyes were bugging out, and he was shaking all over, and he was just a wreck. And so I told him to be quiet. I had to tell him something. And so he kept saying, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." And I said, "I'm not going to kill you. I want to tell you something." So I said, "I forgive you for killing me." And he said, "I don't believe you." And I said, "It's true." And he starts screaming again. He's really overwrought. And so I said, "You have to promise me that you will not fight anymore." And he said, "I can't promise that. I'm a brave." And so I said, "You cannot fight anymore. You have to promise you will not fight. You have to ask if you can stay back and protect the women and the old people and the little children." So he finally decided he would do that. And then I was going out just as the chiefs and the other people were racing up to the lodge to see what had happened, to see why he was screaming. Because I thought he must have had a vision, and they opened the flap, and there he is shaking, and his eyes about to pop out, and he's crying. And so they knew that he had definitely had a vision. So that was the end of it. But after the moment that I forgave him, I didn't cough again. That was the end of the cough, and that was the end of the record. So, by God's grace, I'm so grateful.
Isn't that something? Is there anyone here would like to come forward? Would you? Wonderful. In the time it takes her to walk over here, I want to tell you something that I've mentioned a few times now and then about forgiveness. And I told the staff some years ago, at least 3-4 years ago, that I awakened one morning and heard my Holy Christ self forgive probably the greatest enemy I've faced in this embodiment and many embodiments. And I think that my Holy Christ self wanted me to see that he was forgiving my adversaries and that I must do likewise. So my Holy Christ self taught me to forgive even the most evil of evil people. And so I did. I walked in the footsteps of my Holy Christ self, and I also forgave this person. Every time that I've ever forgiven someone who really is an arch enemy of God and a fallen one, I am still so grateful for the law of forgiveness. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mother. First of all, I want to say thank you for this darshan. It makes me realize from your definition tonight why it has always been so important to me and such a joy to me to come to conferences, to see the messengers face to face, and always, whenever I see pictures of the masters and why I'm so happy to have them in my home, I realize now it is the darshan, and I'm so grateful. And I have a question regarding the inner Buddha and the development of the Buddhic vehicle. Can you expand on that and how it is different, for example, in character and in expression from the inner Christ and the Christ mind? I don't know whether they are the same or I'm confusing them. Or
my sense has always been that it's a greater level of attainment, and the inner bodies, the finer bodies, the chakras, must be more developed to reach that state of Buddhahood as opposed to Christhood.
Thank you, Mother.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mother. Good evening, everyone. I've been feeling for about 3 days that I had to make a testimony about El Morya's list, the dispensation of writing a list of your burdens and following the ritual that he has prescribed and giving 30 minutes of decrees. And it's absolutely changed my life. And last night I was sitting between two of my good friends, and neither one of them had the picture out in the list, and I'm like poking them, where is it? And they had it, and then they got it out. So I was thinking, and then today I talked to someone who hadn't done it yet, and I thought, oh, you just have to do this. So the first night that the dispensation was given, I was here. And I have to say that this list I wrote was pretty incredible. I felt like I was writing a laundry list. I had so many burdens, and they were all different kinds of burdens. Some of them were issues in my personal life and others in my professional life, that my teaching job would be ending in June, and that my part of the school appears to be closing, and that friends were leaving, the children that I'm so involved with would be leaving, and I was worried about, well, where would I go, and how would I live, and money, debts, and it just sort of went on and on. But in addition to that, I was burdened by feeling that I wasn't a good Chela, and that I wasn't cutting through on decrees, and pretty much having like I guess you could call it a midlife crisis, and just issues with being a single person at midlife as well, family issues and things like that. So, and also then in addition to that, I had some leftover grief and grief about current situations that I was dealing with. So all in all, it was quite a list. And and one more thing I had put on it was feeling closer to you, Mother, and also feeling closer to El Morya. So I put down all these things on the list, and then right away I noticed that these burdens really did leave my mind, and that I was able to decree much more clearly than I had been able to in some time. And then fairly short period after that, I got really upset about all these things that I felt were burdens for about 3 days. I did tell you about that the other day. And it wasn't every minute of the day, but I did cry it out, and I processed it. And it was really part of the alchemy, because when these 3 days were over, I felt just incredibly improved about my attitude about all of these different things. And my energy in decrees and in services improved very dramatically. And then at that point, I was able to start the outlined requirements that Dwal Kul had given. And up until that point, I just felt like, oh, I just can't do this. It just seemed overwhelming to me. And then it was no problem. I was like able to be joyful about it, and I thought, this is great, I'll do it. So I had been trying to plan my life and what I would do after the school year was over. And I had a plan about looking for a job on the East Coast. And I realized at that point that my whole plan was wrong. That I wanted to look for a teaching position, but I wasn't putting my priorities in the right order. And what I really needed to think about first was, what teaching center did I want to locate myself at, and where could I give the best service? And also the East Coast, since I wasn't already there, I figured, why locate myself at sea level, since that had been mentioned in one of the dictations. So this became clear in my mind, and then I realized Minneapolis was the place, and I really was not aware of what you said tonight at that time, but I decided that that was definitely where I wanted to position myself, because I wanted to be able to be at all the services I possibly could. So I called a friend from SU, and I told her what I was intending to do. And I knew she had had some subletters in the past, and I said, do you think you could help me out for a while? And she said, sure, you can come and stay with me. She'd let me stay there without a charge for a while, and then I could sublet later. And then I said, well, how far are you from the teaching center? She said, 3 miles. And I'm thinking, that's like practically from Eastgate to here. So I thought, wow, that's really great, So that resolved very quickly. And then one of the past Darshans, Mother, you gave a teaching about issues with our father in this life, and that being a barrier, it could be a barrier to our relationship with Morya. And at that point, a very serious incident started developing with my parents, and my father has been rather emotionally abusive his entire life to both me and the rest of my family. And I just got a chance to look at this nonsense, and I went, what are you letting this be a problem with your relationship with Morya for? This is ridiculous. So I just saw that in a different light, and finally got the last grip I needed to on how it was affecting me in my relationship with Morya. So all the midlife crisis issues kind of faded away, and they just became non-issues really fast. I just, all those things that I thought were important, I really didn't care about them anymore. And if they come along at some time, fine, but now I feel fine about my life, and, it's okay. So the part about feeling both closer to you and to Morya, we did have that brief interchange right during the break of the Inner Child workshop, and I felt like that, was a confirmation of one of the things on the list. And so it just kept going on and on like this. All these different things would happen, and my mind just became much clearer, and I became much more centered. And so I got rid of the old list. I had to rewrite it entirely, and the old list started at 15 and it went up to about 18, and then there were actually more things that weren't on the list, and it was so embarrassing. I kept thinking, gosh, if I lose this list and anyone finds it, it's going to be the biggest embarrassment of my life, because it was just really awful, all these things. So anyway, now my new list is it's a much higher list. Now, a lot of my concerns are spiritual concerns on this list. There were some spiritual concerns on the other one, but it was more like, that I was afraid I might go to the second death if I kept this up. And now there are things about help me get to the heart of the mandala, and, let me know if I'm getting there, and things like that. So I feel like my trust in Morya has grown just infinitely, and that I'm not worried about getting a job anymore. I know that if I've put my trust in him to go to Minneapolis and give the best service I can give at the center, that, he's going to put me in the right position. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say about this list. So if you haven't done it yet, you just have to do this. It's just really made an incredible change for me.
When you see Morya the last thing you go to bed, and he's looking at you, you have to write him a letter, you have to do all these other things before you can go to sleep, because this particular rendition of him, he's alive and there, standing right there.
Thank you for everything, Mother.
Thank you. We're now receiving questions from the field. So this one reads, my inner child has been feeling wounded by the nasty treatment I've been receiving by a superior at work. My great desire is to be free of obsessive thoughts and feelings upon these negative episodes. to be in constant communion with God, which is so profound that I am so unmoved by attitudes upon the integrity of my being, and to secure another job with a mastermind alliance which shall allow me to fulfill my definite major purpose. These attitudes by this superior have intensified as I have been praying to many ascended masters while writing a proposal for a project which I have long desired to do. Question: how can I be more successful at rising above this human consciousness so I can be free to continue to create and to embody the God flame? With gratitude, one of your Philadelphia Chelas. I think that we are shackled and prisoners of our human consciousness. Whether it's somebody else's or ours, the human consciousness is very, very binding. So I would suggest that you work on this in therapy, because somehow you can't do it yourself. You have to be with a professional that knows exactly what to do, how to do it, and to bring you to that point of letting go. So, being more successful at rising above this human consciousness, we have to be willing to let go of the human consciousness and not allow ourselves to be put upon or stepped on. The human consciousness is the conscious level of the unconscious dweller. So when we walk around in our human consciousness, and that human consciousness is not filled with shafts of white fire, then we are really at a human level, because that's where we are. So one of the ways that Gautama Buddha tells us to resolve this is self-observance. To observe what our thoughts and feelings are, how they are impacting people around us. And it's very easy to see when you're in an intense work cycle and you have deadlines to meet and every day is a really intense day for this or that reason. You have to maintain the self-observance, and you almost physically have to take several steps backwards, away from that point, and observe, okay, what is acting here? Is this my child adult? Is this part of me? Is this that part of me? Why am I not free to soar? You're not free to soar because you are tied by your own shackles, by your own karma, to the level where you are right now. And as with Zalem, that Philos, dweller on 2 planets, he finally made the mistake through his human consciousness of going down to South America, going into the jungle, looking around at an open door that was some kind of a jail, going through that door, and the door shuts behind him. And that's where he dies. That's the demise. But had he had a higher state of consciousness and a higher state of Christ consciousness, he would not have been vulnerable to the black magician who caused his death through the swinging shut of that door and that edifice of some kind that was waiting for him there. So the force is waiting for us, and we have to beat it at its game. Because if we don't, it will see our weakness, and then we don't have the ability to get beyond it. So challenging the parts of ourselves is extremely important, and I highly recommend inner child work and working on your psychology as the top priority of your life, because your whole life will change when you get into this therapy. I decided at the end of last summer that I was going to be in therapy for every part of the time of my life that I wasn't doing my obligations, and I have found it extremely helpful. And if you don't do it, you will not possibly be able to know what glorious wonders that God has in store for you, that El Morya has in store for you. We cut ourselves off from the greatest gifts of life by not moving on in this fashion. So the fact that you're saying to me you want to be free of obsessive thoughts and feelings upon the negative episodes, You can do it through decrees. You can do it in self-observance. You can do it by walking the middle way. But there simply is no substitute for the therapy of inner child work. And what's so important about our inner child is yet the mortal part of us. So if we can't bring that child up to a level where she can attain her immortality, then how can we make our ascension? So all of us have a soul that is not immortal. We lost the immortality of our soul eons ago. So if that child is wounded, if that child is hurt, burdened, subject to the adult child and all the other vicissitudes that can go on in our lives, if we're not working on this, now what's going to happen to that inner child when we have the last day of life on earth and next step should be our ascension, but we've left all this unfinished business. So we have to finish up our business. And I came to the realization that I want to be through all of this. I don't want to go home to El Morya, make my ascension, and then have to be told I have to go in some retreat to deal with all my inner child issues. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not a way to go, right? So please work on these issues and think about them and ponder them. And talk to your inner child and to your inner being rather than, being concerned about who did what at the office. If you can't handle that, it's your problem. It's not that person's problem. They're not going to be in your life forever. That's about what I have to say on this subject. I hope it's helpful.
Good evening, Mother, friends. Last week I was looking through a pearl that Saint Germain dictation he gave in 1982, and I came across a statement that I wanted to read and ask you 2 questions about it. He was talking about planet Earth, and he said, "This is the proving ground and the crossroads. No wonder that so many spacecraft have appeared here for thousands of years. They have a vested interest in controlling this evolution." And this is the one sentence I have questions about. He said, "For it is prophesied from the very ancient manuscripts of another world, reflecting the law book of life, that upon this planet the victory of cosmos will unfold." And my question, 2 questions I have, is of all the planets in the cosmos, why is Earth at this point such a pivotal planet for the turning around of what Saint Germain is saying, the cosmos? And my second question would be, how vast has been the corruption of the planets by the fallen angels?
You mean many planets?
Yes.
Let's just stick with planet Earth for the
Okay.
moment here.
Yeah, that's enough.
What's your question about planet Earth now? Why was it the planet chosen?
Yes, why is it so pivotal for the turning around of cosmos?
I think most of you know the history that we have followed and taught. Zachariah Sitchin has given his take on it. So have others, on Daniken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we see here is a pristine planet where there is no death, but only immortal life in the first 3 root races. So these beings on Earth carried that flame, went through their 14,000-year cycle, and returned to God. All of them ascended. In the era of the 4th root race comes aliens, fallen angels. They come because the planet is fertile field. It has a tremendous amount of water, which many planets do not. It has food and an ideal habitat. I believe that God created this particular earth, this world, for those for whom he set the timetable that they had to come home. In the meantime, at the point of the 4th root race, there's this great battle that happens on Maldek, and they're opposing forces, and they have such high technology that they blow up their planet. And so then we have the remaining asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. These are laggards who fell back behind the forward momentum of people from their planet. People of Earth welcomed them, And so at the time of the fourth root race, then we have the laggards, and we have light bearers who are being influenced by them, because in many terms, the fallen ones are smarter than the light bearers, because the light bearers are younger, because we're talking about the fourth root race, so that's the next root race after only perfection was happening. So then what happened is the planet became a free-for-all. And many of the races on this planet are not native to the planet, should not be on this planet, but because of the high degree of technology that they had developed on their previous systems of worlds, they were able to come to this planet unobstructed. And their landing areas have been in the Middle East, and some of them in South America, and wherever else I don't know. But I know for one thing that these particular evolutions did not start on this planet. And in many cases, the way they deal with their enemies, the way they fight battles, are at the height of cruelty and tremendous darkness. So I believe the planet Earth was created by God Elohim for certain sons and daughters who were placed upon this earth, or may have been come here from other systems of worlds, but they came because, according to the cosmic cycles, it was their time to make their ascension, and they had to make their ascension from planet Earth. So while these light bearers are the devout in the 7 major religions of the world and the 8th major religion, then you have all these laggards who have no religion or nothing to speak of that can be even considered holy, because they're entirely materialistic, and their goal is to take over the world, take over the money of the world, and basically control the entire system. So there's this great admixture of beings, and because there is such a dark aspect to the earth because of the coming of the laggards and these others, it really is imperative, according to El Morya, the Darjeeling Council, that the light bearers of this world make their ascension. And I don't know what's going to happen when the light bearers all leave, but of course Saint Germain's planning his 7th root race, and we have a very young root race in the 6th root race. So this was the world intended, where life would be perfect and souls would ascend in 14,000 years, and that was disrupted by evil forces who were evil eons before these life waves appeared here. That's a basic synopsis of how I understand it, and why I think it's very dangerous for light bearers to plan on remaining in embodiment. And El Morya has told me recently that he does not want his chelas to take, while in physical embodiment, a bodhisattva vow. If you want to become a bodhisattva, that's fine, but you should be a bodhisattva like Kuan Yin. You should make your ascension, become a bodhisattva, and serve the world until every light bearer is free. But you shouldn't do that in the unascended state, because of the precarious nature of which way the world is going to go. Where's the plutonium, that we didn't get out of China, or we didn't get out of here or there? Where is all the equipment that is being amassed by those of great hatred in various countries, which ultimately, are there to destroy the United States?
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. I'm just trying to, I know we have a lot of work to do on Earth, but I was trying to see beyond what Saint Germain was talking about, how once we win the victory here, it sends like a shot throughout the universe that we've won here, and he was saying the victory of cosmos will unfold when we won our victory here.
Well, I think that what he's saying here is, if all the light bearers get smart, take up the teaching, use the violet flame, balance their karma in a lifetime or two, the reason that the victory of the cosmos can take place is because if all the light bearers find this path and make their ascension, then they're home free. Then the masters can do whatever they want to do with what's left of these laggards and fallen ones who've been fighting amongst each other forever. But as long as we're here, the masters can't really take the ultimate action to stop them, because in doing so, we would also be injured and burdened. But take all the light bearers off the earth, and what do you have? You have these evolutions that are very vicious and don't really show the stupendous presence of the Holy Ghost within them, or of the Christ or the Buddha. We don't find that. We find that in certain Asian religions, but whether it's a mouthing of things or whether it's a real profound, compassionate Kuan Yin type of relationship with God, I cannot judge them. But what we have seen in World War II, in the Pacific arena, is horrendous cruelty among the Chinese, the Japanese, and so forth. A cruelty that is beyond anyone could dream could happen. So they're here because the masters want us to ascend before they deal with them on a wholesale kind of scale. We're going to conclude our Darshan. So we send all our love to you as stars in the heavens as we see you through the roof of the court, positioned all over the world. And we're very happy that we can have this wonderful warmth in our hearts that makes us realize that all over the world we are one, and these filigree bands of light are sustaining that oneness. It's the earth has shrunk to almost a ball that you can hold in your hands sometimes, just because our chelas are there. So we pray for you profoundly and send you our love from King Arthur's court. And remember, the more that you balance karma, the more empowerment you will receive from God. And with that empowerment, you can multiply the momentum of your decrees. And that needs to be our goal. So I decided starting January 1st that that's what I was going to do. I was going to accelerate as much as I could accelerate, as God would take me, so that I could offer on this altar and on the altar of all of your hearts the momentum of where my attainment is today, as opposed to a month ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. And your attainment should have grown. All of you here and all of you on the patch, the attainment that you had a year ago is not enough. The cycles have moved. They've moved on. You have to transcend yourself. You have to get beyond where you were. And remember what James said, and that was an incarnation of Clara Louise Kinninger. She was always quoting that one quote, "What is that to thee? Follow thou me." So don't let the little things bother you, because that is what trips us up on the path of our ascension. God bless you and seal you in the heart of the Holy Spirit. I ask you to take us collectively to the retreat of your choice, beloved Ascended Masters, and show us what we must do to meet the timetables of Saint Germain. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and the Divine Mother. Amen.